This is Between Hooksets. I'm Jason Walter from In Through the Outdoors with my partner in slime, Kurt Underhill from the fishing crew.
You almost missed that hook set, dude.
Well, it delayed a little bit there, and I'm almost like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Look at me. I got in a fist fight.
Did you?
I got a fat lip. No, so I was eating pizza last night. I let it cool, and I took a bite, and the crust pulled off, and the cheese went bloop. And I screamed, I yelled the F word, and I was freaking out. I cried like a baby. And it puffed up and it blistered. I've never done that in my entire life.
Oh.
No. Just absolutely stupid, ridiculous. Yeah,
well, maybe for real pizza, not gluten-free crust pizza.
Well, I made it out of chicken and Parmesan and an egg. I kind of like it.
Chicken crust pizza?
Oh, yeah, it works great. I'm not kidding you. It's good stuff.
Well, that's new.
I like it. Hy-Vee used to have a really good gluten-free pizza, but they changed their sauce or something. It's a little different. Bruschetta, whatever.
Bruschetta?
Yeah, that one's pretty good. I like that one a lot. Oh, speaking of good, most awarded walleye fishing podcast, Between Hooksets. Got another one. We've got the
look at that shelf.
Huh?
Look at that shelf.
Yeah, look at the shelf. Yeah.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Isn't that a 4th grade wrestling trophy?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they're participation awards. We are the most awarded walleye fishing podcast. We have, matter of fact, there's a banner for it. Most awarded walleye fishing podcast with more participation awards than any other outdoor podcast ever.
Oh, I thought it was a 4th grade wrestling trophy. We're just getting participation medals over here.
Yeah. No. We're getting
perfect.
I
will get mine. I have that whole chain thing of participation.
You do, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have to hang your hat on something, and if we have the most participation awards, from week to week, we'll take it. I'm at 1 with that whole thing. I can deal with it. Couple of things though. I'm gonna clean. I'm airing dirty laundry here. This just has me PO'd. Whoever this Corey DeVille Cadillac guy is boy, I'll tell you what, he's in big trouble with me. Oh, he's right. He's right. Corey, he's right, dude. I'm not kidding you. I laughed my ass off, and I don't have much of an ass, so it's easy to laugh off. But you know what? I laughed it off. That was good, Corey. I'm glad you did that. Here's one more, too. I've been having vehicle trouble. Anybody with an F-150 and you get the warning light for charging system, and it won't go away when you put a new alternator and a battery in, guess what? You've got a corroded wire. And there it is. So you look for the green on the wire harness, and you find that, you splice it, and you fix it, and you move on.
There you go.
Whew.
Well, yeah. We got a lot of stuff going on. Before we get into it, I know we want to talk about this right away. Still time to get into Cedar Shore. Still time to get into Pike Masters. Oh, dude, it's going to be close. We're dropping some. I need to put a post together, drop some hints, but we talked about last week. The new tournament trailer is days away from being done.
I'm excited.
Really excited. So, still time to get into Cedar Shore and the Pike Master. Pike Masters this weekend. Starts Friday. I think registration cuts off tomorrow night at midnight. And Cedar Shore will cut off next Wednesday. I hate to be the guy. I broke my own rule today, but it's like looking at mid-70s for Chamberlain next weekend. Now, I probably look at it again today. Probably look at it now. It's probably different. But last I looked, mid-70s, I quit looking.
Well, that's going to be really weird to wear short sleeve shirts and shorts and not winter clothing.
Well, bring it because it's.
Oh, I'm bringing it.
The weathermen are great at their jobs. They probably have the most participation medals for getting the weather right.
Isn't that the truth? But now that's for getting weather right. That's a whole different story. We are the most awarded walleye fishing podcast with the most participation awards of any podcast ever.
But yeah, so tonight we're going to touch base a little bit about little Francis case. Nick is the communications director for Game Fish and Parks. So kind of all things Game Fish and Parks and the Midwest Walleye Challenge. And honestly, they reached out to me. I don't know much about it, so I'm really excited for tonight.
I am too, because I was thinking, hey, we should talk Midwest Walleye Challenge, but who the heck do I call? Who do we find? Whatever. And then all of a sudden it falls in our lap, and we've got Nickaroo with us.
And then we got this guy.
A high five there, buddy.
You know what, guys? I always try to say something witty when I get on these types of shows, and y'all officially broke me because I had about 37 things come to mind in your opening 5 minutes, and I don't even know which one to pick. I really don't. I was going to say Kurt brings me on to talk about my fantastic abilities in making food. Chasing, I've never encountered such a danger because I only eat 3 things. It keeps life safe. I have an F-150. I don't know a thing or two about alternators. Nonetheless, look at a wire. So I you know what? I'm broke, you guys. This is all I've got.
Well, you've got to feel pretty happy about being on the most awarded walleye fishing podcast ever. So
that one, I had so many I couldn't even come up with one I had
right.
in my mind.
I could see you in the green room there backstage. I'm like, okay, Nick's things are just woo.
I would have worn my fancier sweatpants if I had known that I was getting on.
Yeah, I'm really bummed you didn't wear the fancy sweatpants, but oh well. No,
you probably have your fancy sweatpants on tonight. Your Menard special.
I wish I did, but I had to go to the Pizza Ranch and eat with the kids. So we were at the Pizza Ranch, and I got back, and I did not have time to even slip into my comfy slippers. My walleye skin, authentic walleye skin faux slippers.
That walleye skin.
I have a couple contests for you to enter, Chasen, and I also have some clothes to sell you.
You do good. Yeah. Hey, I'm all about that. I mean, I dress like a ragamuffin, but every once in a while I can pull off looking hot.
With that, let's talk about Game Fish and Park stuff.
Yeah. You know what? Not a bad idea here. Let me blink that on and off for you.
So, Nick has been on the show a couple times and also has been a host on the other side during the Bass Cup last year. But Nick wears a lot of hats inside of Game Fish and Parks, and I guess let's probably start with, we did our deal on Francis, or on Oahe and Sharp, dabble a little bit in Francis case, but we're a couple weeks out from Francis case. And what do we got? What does our fishery look like down there? Because last fall, people were saying that they just don't exist and it's not good and all these things. And then all of a sudden, the fish I'm seeing coming out of there are super crazy healthy.
Yep. So I'm going to go super biologist on you guys. So please stop me when it gets inhumane. So first off, let's talk about what exactly we have in Lake Francis case right now for numbers of walleyes, for quality of fish. It's no secret that the overall abundance of walleyes is a little bit down when you look at 23, 24 in terms of a population within Lake Francis case. However, and this is really kind of unique for our Missouri River reservoirs, 58% of those fish are over 15 inches. And Kurt, you referenced exactly what I had on my mind. When we look at this spring, I've been seeing some awesome streamers coming out of Chamberlain. I've been seeing some really quality fish. It's 17, 18, 19 overs. I mean, really good to see. So one thing, I'm going to kind of dive into the weeds here. We've had the rain, we've had the snow right now. As an angler looking at your tournament, despite it being 70 degrees, which I'll believe when you host me a tournament that's actually nice weather, I'll believe when I see that, runoff is really critical for Lake Francis case. So when you look at those years before, we've had low water years, we've had low runoff years, we've had very mild winters. Francis case, when you look at the upper Missouri River snowpack, that mountain snowpack maybe we look at for Oahe, it doesn't really matter because you think about a water filter, that thing's gone through 4 dams by the time it gets to case. It really relies on the nutrients that come in from the White, from Peace Creek, from Platte Creek, some of those bigger tributaries. And without that runoff, you're not going to have that walleye production. And that's kind of what you saw in 23, 24.
So that's never been a thought in my mind. that the dams are actually filters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, right. I didn't think of that either.
Never would have thought like a dam being a filter. Like I joked, we were talking today about, hydroelectric and all this stuff. And I said, to me, like, they want to build wind towers or coal fire, nuclear, whatever. I'm like, put another dam right below Hawaii Dam. Because last time I checked, the water wasn't wore out, but for fishing, it might be wore out. I mean, you might be taking nutrition, your invertebrates out of the water system, right? Did I get my Mark Finsel statement right? Invertebrates?
You did pretty good. Yep. And it really depends on how you look at it. So, I mean, that Missouri River, that mountain snowpack, by the time it gets down the Missouri River to Fort Thompson, it's pretty dang sterile. I mean, so you're looking entirely that, natural runoff that occurs right there in the prairie. Now, I'm also going to tell you you look at Lewis and Clark Lake, kind of a different scenario. You have really high flows going. That water is not spending time in that reservoir. So it's kind of a vice versa. If you want really good fishing in Francis Case, you have to have really good runoff. If you want really good fishing in Lewis and Clark, that water's got to spend some time in that reservoir. And so that's what you're seeing now is you're seeing our best natural recruitment that we have for walleyes in Lewis and Clark because we haven't had that runoff. So it's really kind of a yin and the yang. And I know that we're talking Francis Case here, so I'll try to not go too far off, but that's really just the dynamics of each of these individual reservoirs along the river, essentially. From Peck, Sac, Oahe, Sharp, and Francis Case, Lewis and Clark, they're similar, right? They're Missouri River Reservoir, but they act pretty different.
Yeah, well, you've got Sharp and Lewis and Clark that have faster water. Oahe and Lewis or Francis Case are slower, right? There's just not a whole lot of current there. There's some current, but not a lot.
Well, and then you also have to keep in mind, let's talk about water levels too. Lake Francis Case has a drawdown every single fall, and we aren't seeing that in Sharp. Sharp, if we fluctuate, 2 to 4 feet in a year, we've had a pretty busy year. Francis Case, we're drawing it down 15 feet every single fall.
Ryan, go back to that because this is from our friend that, at Deep Dive. And I was looking at this because they asked me water levels and all these different things, but negative 20 feet. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because when you look at it from your normal pool, from your full pool, that's what that's taking it as.
Wow. Yeah. So going north of Cedar Shore, there are going to be, if I remember right, I fished it with Kurt, from PK Lures, Kurt Reef. And are there going to be some sandbars, some different things that are going to be exposed, I would guess?
So you're going to have some. I will fully admit, Kurt tried to call me out for cheating on Monday night because I may have taken a pretty good look at Francis Case from an airplane. I'm being fully honest. And I sent Kurt all the pictures to prove it too.
It is incredible.
It really is. It is a completely different way to look at the reservoir. You can see there's one side that has mud. There's one side that doesn't. You can kind of see those contour breaks. It is a whole different, it was about 2,000 feet up. It is an entirely different view. So to specifically answer your question, Chasen, yeah, there's going to be low water hazards, but I wouldn't say that it's going to be anything that we aren't used to seeing in early spring Francis Case because we have that annual fall drawdown. We're going to be about the same type of water levels that we see when we have this tournament every year.
Okay. So from year to year, we're really not going to notice a bunch of different.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, like I said, going back to what your net saw compared to what we saw fishing last year, the fishing last year was, I hate to say it, almost terrible, right? It was terrible.
It was.
And it was kind of like Oahe a couple years ago. I remember sitting in the fisheries meeting and Finsel saying, we have no 15 to 19-inch fish. And then that summer came and it was like gangbusters. And I'm like, they didn't teleport here.
Yep.
They're here. Your nets aren't seeing them. Your nets are seeing them in Francis Case. The fishermen weren't seeing them. What do you think that is? Is that zebra mussels? Is that what's going on? And I've heard that the water is gin clear down there.
I would say you are correct on all fronts. So this is going to be my game fishing parks and an angler answer, kind of both. We talked about how we had that mild winter. gizzard shad are what drive this fishery. They drive Francis Case. They drive Lake Sharp. They play an important role on Lake Oahe. Gizzard shad do not like the cold. If you get a cold winter, they are really going to die. There are going to be a lot of gizzard shad that die. Now, fortunately, there's going to be some adults that survive, and we don't need a whole bunch, and they can repopulate a fishery really quickly. But we kind of saw the inverse in this situation. So those shad did not die. You think about what brings such a great early season bite on Francis Case, that Chamberlain area. It's a combination of there's no bait, because if those shad die, your bait's not competing against anything. Those fish are hungry. And again, factor in the reservoir. We know exactly pretty much where those fish are going to stage. Now, that said, when these shad are in the system, and we had a good amount of winter survival, that led to a good amount in the spring. That's going to make spring fishing tougher. But most importantly, they really produced that summer. So when you've got a full fish, your bait's competing against, literally more options in there. You look at the weight of the fish, and we saw our best relative weight. When we talk WR, that's relative weight of a fish. Usually you're looking between 80 and 90 in a reservoir, and we were 92, 93. So you're looking at fat, fed, happy fish. They didn't need to bite. They didn't need to feed for very long. That's not very good for us as anglers. Right. For your zebra mussel thing, I would say that's also a factor too. We had zebra mussels found in Lake Francis Case in 2019. You look at this for 5-6 years. That's kind of the point that you're going to start seeing. Not, I always say impacts loosely, because I don't want to say it in a negative tone, but I also want to say it changes things. You're right. That water is gin clear. Not only does that make fishing itself different, but it also will change the vegetation. And I think that's one thing, chasing over in your neck of the woods, eastern South Dakota, we're used to weeds. We're used to submerged timber. Francis Case, we don't really think about that, but we're seeing weeds growing in areas they've never grown before. And most importantly, we know we have wind here, especially in Kurt's tournaments, which I'm sure will come up in the forecast here soon. I always get that jab in.
Right on.
But you get heavy waves just pounding a shoreline. You're not going to have weeds grow if they only grow to a certain depth, so shallow. Well, those zebra mussels cleared it up. Those weeds can get to a point that those waves aren't wrecking them. So you've actually got kind of shallow vegetation that we've never had in Francis Case before. And that's absolutely going to change where the fish are and how you fish them.
So you've got weed lines to fish then.
You're starting to see that.
Are you seeing weed growth deeper because of the clearer water?
Yep, that's what it would be. So you have that zebra mussel, clears up the water, weeds grow deeper. Not just do they get deeper, but they survive out there where they might not have. Yep, that my buddy
right on,
Chris, he knows what he's doing over there. We're actually Chris's date night tonight, just so you know. He said he was looking for something to do, so we got Chris.
Perfect. So people, maybe I heard this, maybe I dreamt this, I don't know, but people are saying like them fish were hanging in the trees longer and they're harder to get out of those trees. And that's probably why the fish, they were there. They just stayed in the trees a lot longer than they normally do. Is that kind of the case?
You didn't dream that because I said it. I mean, that's firmly what I believe is you look, especially down when you get into that Platte, Pickstown area, it's kind of like a Oahe that you see up in that Whitlock area that you have pretty good submerged forests out there. And those fish, especially with that clear water, they didn't really want to come out of there because they had food, they were comfortable, they had shade from those trees. Why would you leave, right? Yeah. And that just changes how anglers approach Francis Case. When I think about Francis Case, I think about bottom bouncing and trolling along flats. That's kind of not the case anymore right now.
So the other thing I've been hearing, talking to guys getting ready for Chamberlain, that there's a really good 19 to about a 23-inch class in that system. Like they're like, we're catching overs on a regular, not big, but 23, that era of over, that size of overs. And I've heard that from several guys. So, I mean, the fishery's healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of speaks towards, kind of the point I'm hoping I'm alluding to here is that there's really quality fish in there because you're right, Kurt. I'm not going to call a spade a spade. Fishing was tough last year. It was really tough. It was downright bad at times. But that also means we didn't have the harvest. And those fish, if it was because of that food, which I do firmly believe it was, they're growing well. We get a 16-inch fish in Francis Case after 3 years. You take a year off harvest, you let that baby keep growing. Guess where they're going to be, Kurt? Exactly what you said.
Yeah. So we're talking to Mark and you guys at the fisheries meeting in Pierre, and I brought it up, and Mark doesn't oversee Francis case, but you guys said, it's kind of weird because you guys were scratching your head because the net surveys showed you, yeah, we may be down a little bit, but not what the angler survey showed you.
Yep.
And, you hear that, right? And it was actually, in your guys' defense, was like, you guys were truly concerned, like something isn't right. Something isn't right.
Well, the fish have moved. There, you guys, you do your gill nets and those nets in the same spot year after year after year, right? You don't move them. Maybe you have now.
So that's actually not true. So anywhere between 6 and 99 feet, it is going to be a randomized location within the reservoir that those gill nets are placed. Now, to go back to my point earlier, if you've got a forest that you look at the graph and you see trees on trees, we ain't dropping a net in there. That's just a waste of time, and that's going to break things and not give us any good info. So you'll set it on the edge of the trees, but they are not the same spots. I think that's kind of where you see that difference too, is because from an angler standpoint, you go fish the same spots, right? If I tell you I'm going to go fish in Platte, guess where I'm starting? I'm starting at Red Rock or Two Johns. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I tell you I'm going to Chamberlain, and guess what? I'm going to Crow or the White. Those are my two starting points, right? Mm-hmm. Anglers, we think like that, but these net placements, they truly are randomized. So we put anywhere between 60 to 99 feet in the reservoir, they're going to be placed.
That's good to know, because in eastern South Dakota, I believe, if you look at the GF&P maps, they have the trap and the gill nets, and they're in the same spot every year, whether that's true or not. I know a lot of anglers like myself, when I first moved here, went, those spots don't change. They must know there's fish there, so you fish those spots, and you hang your hat on that. But if you guys are moving the nets,
that has been a change. That has been a change in the sampling, Chase, and so that's been since 17. So that was called stratified sampling, and that's the case that you do look at. These are the high percentage areas I'm going to catch me some fish, right? And that's why you saw those catch rates so much higher in those nets if you looked at pre-17 data. But we went to more of a standardized sampling, which is truly randomized locations. You're not going to catch near as many fish, right? Because I ain't catching as many walleyes in 98 feet of water as I probably am in 18. But that said, it gives me a better idea of the reservoir year over year, because if I'm stratified and I'm playing, I'm Nick the angler, I think I know where the fish are going to be. It doesn't, there's some of that bias in there, right? So it kind of, it makes your sampling, while you don't catch as many fish, a little bit more, cleaner, better.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I use the Gary Allen gauge. Last year, Gary and the crew got a bad rap last year because they were blamed for, you fished out Lake Francis case. You fished, you caught all the fish. And I was one of them, because I'm like, well, that's what else can it be? Until you hear from the biologist. But then you watch how Gary and his crew have been doing this year. And like you said, those 19 to 23 inch fish, or at least they look like they're that big. The other thing I find interesting is every once in a while, you'll have a group catching sauger or sawguy, and that's it. Interesting.
So here's a little bit of, I did my homework for you guys, actually, because I know you guys actually ask tough questions, and I know you can ask me tough questions. So I try to come prepared. So here's another challenge for anglers that are out there when you're out on these reservoirs. Of the fish caught in nets, what percentage do you think were walleyes or sauger? I want to hear from you guys. I'm going to take a guess, and I'm kind of challenging the anglers to do this. Yeah,
let's challenge our crowd. I mean, we have 50-some people watching right now. Right. I'd like to hear from them. So are you talking Francis case, though?
I am talking Francis case, yep.
How
Francis case?
Percentage. So we're talking like 75% walleye, 25% sauger.
I am talking of all fish. So we're counting perch, we're counting catfish, I'm counting gizzard shad.
We got our first one in, 21%.
Okay, one of you watched the meeting.
Oh, cheater.
80% walleye, 20% sauger. So
60-40. Okay.
So whoever had 21, I can't see that, Chase.
Yeah, that's all right. It was I was writing 75 when you said 75. I'm like, so I was going 75-25.
So Chris is close. Chris Daldorf was close, but Hat Creek Valley Outfitters, you nailed it. It's 21% of the actual fish in the net were walleyes, and 8% were saugers. So when you look at it, of these fish that are coming through the nets, only a third of them are what we're after, you guys. So when you look at that graph and say, I don't see them.
Let me guess, 67% were catfish.
22%, Kurt, 22.
Oh, wait, really? We're not on Hawaii.
We're not on Hawaii. So I'll kind of break that down for you. So 21% were walleye, 8% were sauger, 22% catfish. So that's pretty much half your fish caught, right? So then you get a little mix. 10% were perch, 2% smallie. Now here's where I also wanted to lead into this. 12% of the fish were gizzard shad. So
really,
when you look at that,
how many paddlefish?
So paddlefish aren't going to recruit to those nets. So because I
go right through those things.
Well, I want to talk about that when we get closer to the Midwest Walleye Challenge, because when you look at those net results, you're going to see a lot of those fish that are sampled. Jason, I think you and I have talked about this. You look at our GFP survey results, you're going to see a lot of those walleyes that are like 8 inches to maybe 20 inches, right? And where are the big fish?
Right.
They don't get trapped in the net. I think Mark talked about it when we were on a couple weeks ago. You got a 30-inch walleye that swims in the 2-inch mess. Guess what that thing's going to do? What's this? I'm turning around. We ain't sampling it because we want to sample and make sure those fish are working their way up to your classes. When we get them to 20 inches, we're pretty dang happy, you guys. So
done our job.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. And those big fish, they're so calculated in their movements. They are not just willy-nilly swimming around. They might be at one point, but I mean, just on average, any given day, they are in their deep water sanctuary and they are doing their deal until it's feeding time, and then they go shallow. So they're probably not even brushing a net. Is my guess.
Now, come spawning time, if you see a biologist holding the big walleye, that was a spawning walleye. Because that one we want to go when we want to get its eggs. Totally different net that we're using there. For what we're talking here in sampling, we're looking in those, 1 to 3, 4-year-old walleyes. And even those little guys, they ain't going to show up in that survey either because they're so small. I know only 2%, right? But again, when you look at it from where those are in the reservoir, those are pretty in low, those rocky points, those shallow areas, they're pretty concentrated. That's not saying there's not all that many fish in there. There's a ton of bass in there. There's some really good bass fishing in the river. It's just that when you look at it from a cumulative population in our nets, stratified across the lake, it's only about 2%. But I go back to, I get easily squirreled if y'all can't tell. But when we're looking at those age 0 walleyes, we have to electrofish them because those little things ain't going in a net. And so you then go in electrofish. Now, the good news is last year, Kurt, I think you know how rainy, haily a little bit, I'd also like to say, had some hail in your tournament. But you had pretty dirty water. You had pretty good runoff. Guess what? Those age 0 walleyes are looking right about average. So that's that year's production. So just the different ways that you sample various fish. And I saw a really long question for me. So hopefully I get stuck.
Yeah. I hear this. I've been saving this one. I love our conversation, but Clint has a good has a question.
Yes. Yes. So you bring up a great point. So one thing that I would like to point you to is we just had our winter fish meeting in Chamberlain last week. That's with all of our fishery managers and Chris Hull. I was not able to join that podcast, but on our Game Fish and Parks podcast and blast, sorry guys, that's the second most participate award podcast. We sit down with all of the fishery managers, and that includes Mark Ermer up in the Northeast, and that includes Dave Lucchese. And I say Southeast kind of loosely. That line is right there on Ponset and Lake Albert. So yes, Clint, we have that information. And I think one thing that went really well for us with that Francis Case meeting was the fact that we were able to offer it virtually. We were able to bring it, you think about the Northeast, is it Watertown, is it Webster, that type of information. I think with what we did was so successful with Chamberlain and Francis Case that it's going to open us up for more public meetings like that. So hopefully that answers your question, Clint.
And Clint, it answered my question that Clint asked, but we're gonna try to have them on this program.
Yep.
In the next few weeks, I would say within a month. So we're gonna get off of the center of the state, the Missouri River. Clint, it's a great question. We've set ourselves up to have that Eastern South Dakota conversation, but we've got tournaments coming up on Francis Case and things going on over there, and that's why Nick's on tonight. That, and we've got the Midwest Walleye Challenge, so it only seemed appropriate to have you on this evening. So thanks for being here, by the way.
No, thanks for having me. And just one more, I will say the area fisheries managers do a really good job staying in their lane and their region. And I talk about everything if you all can't tell. So that's one thing too, that when we're talking about these public meetings, it's easy for a Wahi and Sharp and Case and Lewis and Clark, right? Because we're talking about two fisheries. We can give you that lake survey data. Well, shoot, we get up in that Northeast. I'm not just going to give you Bitter Lake. I'm not going to just give you Wabae Lake. Yeah, fishing was great on those. Hey, Tom, fishing was great on those, this winter. Sounds like we had a great ice season. But I think all of us know, and especially Clint, I know you know, those ain't the best fisheries. I mean, the best fisheries are the ones that the three of us know about. And
right.
And that's it, right? So
right.
It's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit more, those we want to talk a little bit more like dynamics of that increasing water levels, the dynamics of the perch population, how that all plays together. So it's just going to be a little bit of a different format. But, like I said, we're doing our darndest to get that info out there. I encourage you to give that podcast a listen. It's a really good hour and a half. And then obviously these guys still let me on too, and I appreciate it.
Except for you have to listen to Chris Hall for an hour and a half.
You do, and I was down in Nebraska, and I wasn't able to get on. I was doing some family stuff, so I wasn't even allowed to navigate with that. He says, I think Nick's nervous for this like 5 times in the middle of the podcast. I just wished I was on it.
You brought up water level, and I'm going to pop up a picture here real quick, and I'd love for people to guess this, but there's no way in hell anybody will ever guess what lake this is. But if you look real close at that white water right there, that's a landing. That's a landing that I don't think has seen the light of day since the late 70s, because I made a few calls. Have you seen that?
Can I guess? Because I know,
I already told you. That's Lake Sinai. This, folks, this is the old landing that from the guys that I talk to who live around the lake say they can't remember seeing that ramp. And it's rearing its ugly head. Now we've picked up about 1 3/4 inches of precip. So, whatever, that's not going to do that much to Sinai, but still, that Tom, good guess, but not the right guess. I could not believe it when I walked up and saw that ramp. And I went back in history. I went back to 1985 on Google Earth. And I'm like, And then when I called a few guys, the locals, and said, do you remember that ramp? No, I lived here all my life. So, we're guessing it was the 70s into maybe the early 80s, because it was mid 80s or so that they moved that ramp to not quite where it is now. They had to move it again east a little ways. So that's the third placement there.
So Jason, I'm going to take a glass half full approach on this. And I'm not going to date myself quite as well as you, because I was born in 96. So I can't give too much historical background like you can. So
the internet existed when Nick was born.
Oh, boy.
But I mean, I'll go back to Clint's point here a little bit. You look at those Northeast, and we talked about it with Mark too. If you ask me, that's not the worst thing in the world, right? Like if you get those water levels to come down, you get some weeds and grass. And I'm not talking just a little bit of grass. I'm talking like, let's get some of that woody shrubs. Let's get some good vegetation that's not just going to die in a year. That's when you get back into those really awesome perch booms, because perch fishing up in the Northeast, it's not what it was in the good old days, right? Well, when you look at what the recipe was for the good old days, you had water just going into areas that we'd never seen before. That's going to lead to those population booms. So to see that water come down, it stinks in the moment, right? But you get some of that vegetation up, and in 2 or 3 years, if we flood this baby back, we're going to have a really good couple of years of fishing.
Yeah. Especially you bring it up, the perch, because perch don't lay eggs in the sand and the gravel and the rocks like walleye do. That's not what they do. And I can't remember what it's called, but they hang their little little egg baggy things or whatever, they're attached to like tree branches and not weeds though, right?
Any sort of vegetation that they
anything that's standing and okay.
Yep, and that's kind of what we talked about with Mark a couple weeks ago. Is those Oahe perch are almost looking good again because those water levels are getting into some of those trees. Like I pick on Peoria Flats right below Kurt's house. That's now kind of becoming that perch spawn habitat. So whether it's good weeds, the kind of that woody vegetation, if they've got somewhere that's stable to hang, that's why I say not grass, right? Because if it's just I don't mow my lawn for a year and then I flood it, that's not really going to be perch spawning habitats. Maybe mine, because I live here in Fort Pierre, but I mean, that's the type of structure that you're looking for, that habitat that you're looking for. And then that's how those fish survive, because they have somewhere to hide from predators, hide out. If you just put a fish in that system, you're basically feeding walleye and pike.
Well, all I want to tell you right now is if we can figure out a way, Arbor Day is coming up and they give free trees away at the school. So any parents listening, if you want to go plant them on Sully or Peoria Flats, that'd be great.
I'm just going to sit this one out because I'm going to assume there's a poor person.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
Oh, yeah, Paul, yeah, you're right. We don't see cattails like we used to. Yeah. I guess they all basically got flooded out, right?
And another great example, right? Because you look at where those cattails were. I'll pick on Bitter again. You had guys that had pretty awesome pheasant hunting spots in those cattails, and then they all got flooded, right? And then they go and catch limited walleyes and perch off them. So kind of getting outside my wheelhouse. I'm not very good with plants, I'll tell you that much right now, even though I have a range miner. But I think it just kind of depends on what you see those water levels bleed into that soil type. And, if you have good, stable environmental conditions, the vegetation, Mother Nature does a pretty good job taking care of things herself. She's going to grow things that grow where they belong.
All I got to say is I don't know what a range miner is, but I had a few miners back in the day. I don't know if you remember. I was in a field one time, so that might have been a range miner.
I was going to say, range men, I could run a lot farther and faster than you, Kurt. I still can.
Well, I think Mother Nature did us a great favor on Oahe because the perch are getting bigger and bigger, and I bet we're going to catch some big perch the next couple of years on Oahe.
Boys, I'm a little concerned about Felby telling you got a gift that show up in the mail if we're ready to open it next Thursday live. Never know what the old Phelps what's going to come.
I'm curious to see it.
I don't think I let class these anymore.
But
I did the Grassland Coalition, the Grassland Coalition Range Seminar, whatever. It was the coolest thing ever. Yep. I loved it.
It's really cool. I really like prescribed fire too. I took that a little too far with my apartment a few years ago, but that wasn't me, I promise.
Careful, man. Careful.
Controlled burn in my apartment. Not a good idea.
That one wasn't my fault, I swear.
It's funny because we're getting the new tournament trailer, and I was at work today, and Tiger's fire extinguishers pulled up out front, and I said, "Hey, I might need a fire extinguisher or two for my new trailer. Ooh, give me them coming." And it was not something I thought about in the order, but when I saw the fire extinguisher truck, I knew Nick was there, so we need fire extinguishers.
Oh, geez.
But Nick, we're about halfway through the show. What is the Midwest Fishing Challenge?
Yeah.
I've been emailed by the guy, asked me to be part of it. I actually called you and go, is this real? I don't even know what this is.
Yep. And
explain what it is, how it works, and what it's for.
Absolutely. So what the Midwest Walleye Challenge is, it is a citizen science event. So I don't want to say fishing tournament because it's not like what we're going to go do here at Cedar Shore in a couple weeks. It is literally download an app. It's the MyCatch app, and you pay $25 to enter, and you get $20 in discount tackle gift card when you get it back. So, you are going to, it's not something that we're breaking the bank or we're winning massive prizes. I go back towards, we don't sample those big fish, right? Well, this is a way, and I've heard this from a lot of anglers. I want to share the fish I catch with biologists. I want to tell them when I don't catch fish. I want to tell them what I'm catching, what's in my favorite fisheries, that type of stuff. This is how you can do that. This is how you can literally go in, and the app tracks your location, so it verifies exactly where you are, and every walleye you catch, whether it's a 14-incher, whether it's a 14-pounder, whether it's a 14-ouncer, it all counts towards what we're looking to do, because this is a way that data goes in. There's a team of students, interns, other biologists that are going to look at this, and then they will provide that input to South Dakota Game Fish and Parks biologist. And it's done really well in Iowa. They've done that several years. We are one of 5 states. Michigan's going to do it when their walleye season starts. Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, Iowa, and then us. So we're us and 5 states. And those states give really good feedback that, this is a good way to see some of those bigger fish that we don't sample in our nets. So I'll pick on Nebraska, McConaughey, those Lake Mac monsters. They aren't going to really sample. And this is how anglers can say, yeah, there's a lot of 20 to 30-inch fish in this reservoir. It also kind of shows some of those reservoirs. I'll pick on the eastern side of state again. There's a lot of water over there. And if there's a favorite fishery that's getting a lot of attention, holy smokes, guys, this is one that we might need to increase access here. We might need to work on this boat ramp. Anglers love this fishery, and they're catching some really nice fish out of it. So it's not going to look exactly like Sanye's boat ramp chasing, fortunately. But, it's just a good way. Submit every walleye you catch. You're going to win some prizes. There's walleye. Yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
Strictly walleye, or is it anything?
Walleye, sauger, or sawguy. So it is solely focused on walleye fishing. So sorry, bass guys. Definitely sorry, catfish anglers. But this is truly
catfish anglers. I might make it a mandatory during the Governor's Cup that you got to bring 10 catfish in. Like, it might be mandatory that everybody's got to bring 10 catfish in. We got to get that system cleaned out.
I knew when Mark said it's a biomass, I knew where that was going in your head.
I'm going back to the John Brock's Trash Masters. We have a little neighborhood Trash Masters, a lot of fun. Got to say, I fished it 6 times, and I got a first, a first, a third, a first, a first, and I got a fourth. So that's the only thing I can catch, but we got to take some catfish. Anyways, but so is there any possibility in the future that this Midwest Fishing Challenge gets, for the Northeast guys, see perch on it?
It could be. That's something that we would visit, because it is not. It is not a. It's a Game Fish and Park sponsored event. I mean, we're helping promote it, but it is done through that Angler Atlas and that My Catch app, and that's who you heard from, Kurt. Would be, I think it's Jim Clark with Anglers Atlas. Yeah. So it is. This is not Game Fish and Parks. We're taking that data. It's our app we made. That's not what this is. This is a partnership that is done on a multi-state level, a regional level, and that's why you see those other states participating. It gives a perspective into the fisheries all along the Midwest, the walleye populations all across the region, and then that data on the South Dakota level helps Game Fish and Parks biologists. So that would be something that we would want to bring up with them, Kurt, and I think it kind of depends. My challenge for everyone listening is, pay $25, get yourself in this thing. There is random draw awards. There is longest walleyes, most walleyes, tough luck. Just even if you don't, that's the nice thing. Even if you don't catch a fish, it's still going to count towards this tournament, because I always say 0 is not no data. If you go fishing 10 times and you don't catch any fish, it goes back towards where this conversation started on Lake Francis case. We want to know that too, right?
Right.
The catfish tournament is the side pot of Governor's Cup. I'm sitting really good for that one.
So Paul has a question for you, Nick.
Yep.
Good question.
This will not change the creel surveys at all, Paul. That is still going to continue. Our normal angler harvest reporting creel surveys we do, this is not replacing that. This is just simply an above and beyond fun way to get involved in biology. Fun way to share your information, win a couple prizes, compete against your buddies, but we are not getting rid of any of those other types of surveys. So I want to make sure that's extremely clear. This is not replacing nor taking away anything. This is a fun, get involved in biology tournament, for lack of a better words.
Well, I mean,
they are.
Again, going back to the Francis Case statement I made earlier, your nets were showing something different than anglers were seeing.
Yep.
And yes, you have a creo survey, but it doesn't happen every time you're out. I mean, I probably get creo surveyed once, maybe twice a year. And I don't fish a lot, but I see them a lot. But this is every time you're out fishing, you're helping do a Creo survey.
Absolutely. On your own recognizance too. And it is not this isn't a week challenge. This isn't a week. This is April 1st to June 29th. So when you look at the times that folks are out fishing, catching fish, this is right in the middle of that high angler pressure and high catch rates. So it's going to give really good data. And like you said, Kurt, if I go fishing 100 times here between now and June 29th, which, yeah, I'm probably gonna, or at least I'm going to do my best to, that's, I might get creeled a couple times. Now that all go towards our data. It's still a good survey, but this is my way to enter my data every single time I'm out on the water, whether I catch a fish or not.
So what if you download, is it an app, right? Correct?
Yep. My catch app.
You download the My Catch app. What are they asking you in there?
So essentially what it is you turn on your GPS, and Kurt knows for a fact he's not talking to a technological guy. So I'm kind of pulling it up to both redneck screen share and talk my way through. So I've got my event here. And so what I will do is when I go out on the water, I will hit start log of the trip. And so then it'll keep track of, I might have fished for 2 hours. I might have fished for 4 hours. I don't know. It's going to know where I fished, how long I fished, and then just every single fish you catch, take a picture of that, and it's going to upload it for you. It'll take care of whether it's a big fish, whether it's most fish, but then the folks with Anglers Atlas, those students, not our biologists, are going to go in and say, Nick, 15-incher, Nick, 14-incher, Nick, 16-incher, and that's going to extrapolate that data.
And let's be clear, your fishing spots are not going to be shared.
Not shared at all. Absolutely. So it is shared with GF&P biologists on a water body level, not even I was at West Bend, I was at DeGray, I was at the tail race. Simply a water body level, and at the community with your other anglers, it ain't getting shared at all. It might say big fish came out of Lake McConaughey. It might say big fish came out of Lake Oahe. I think we all kind of know where the big fish are probably going to come out of. So no, this is not here for Nick to steal your secret spots. I'd have figured out a smarter way to do it. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, well, it'd be fun to see those spots on a map, though.
It would be.
Yeah.
And we kind of have some of that with like our proud angler. If you go look at that map, some folks kind of share where it was. You can look at some of those fisheries. But again, that's anglers reporting, on their own free will that they caught a really nice fish. Now they get that certificate out of it. It's a good accomplishment. It literally catch and release. You just got to take a picture of it on a bump board. So,
but you're allowed. I mean, you're allowed to keep your fish. I mean,
absolutely.
It's not telling you, but yes, it's basically recording catch and release in theory.
Yep. But say I go pre-fish for Cedar Shore next week and I catch 60 walleyes and I don't keep one of them, it's going to count for 60 walleyes. All that data is going to be shared. And it's going to be just that extra handling time of take a picture, put it on the bump board and get her back in the water. So, yep, absolutely.
So they're kind of recording where you're at. So they're not asking depth. They're not asking water temp. They're just a photo and it does it.
Yep, that does it. And that shows the length of it too, right? The photo on the bump board, because that's what we want, right? When you look at those lake survey data, that's where we put all those out. And Tom, I don't need you sharing too many of your secret spots up until like April 14th. Then we can put it out there. But I mean,
I think Tom's like wondering if you have the insight on the app is what I'm thinking.
I'm lucky to text you guys. You know that. So, but
I mean, if you're out here, wanting to better the fisheries, even as a tournament angler, I shared with Nick and Brian over the weekend that I got an email calling me an idiot and how dare we run tournaments. And I played the high road and it respond. It's not a bad thing to catch fish, guys.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah,
Mark Finsel straight up told us we could use more fish caught. It's a good, healthy, we need kill rate, or there's a better word for it scientifically, but we need a mortality rate in a lake for it to survive. So yes, I like catch release. I don't mind. I love doing my tournaments in the spring where I can release the fish back, but it's not a bad thing to keep your limit.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. And we didn't really go into this when we had Mark on again, because we were kind of playing, we focused on the Missouri River, but I mean, I'll go in and say this, a regulation isn't necessarily the best thing. I'm going to pick on Lake Ponset from when I was in college. And if you loved catching fish, boy, oh boy, did you have a lot of fun at Lake Ponset, right? We
Damn
got
straight. You had to have a baseball clicker to get to 100, literally.
Exactly. And they're all 14 3/4 inches because guess
Yes,
what?
they were. Some were 14 7/8, but
That's
none
true.
were
That's
15.
true. A couple of those nicer ones were just shy of 15. But you look at that and you had a record year class, and then you followed that up with a record year class, and you followed that up with a record year class. And all those fish stockpiled at 15 inches because those growth rates went down. There was none of that harvest. Well, guess what? You take that 15-inch minimum off. Lake Ponset's looking, pretty good right now because now you're seeing those fish with doing what Mother Nature intended. When there's good populations, there's good harvest. When there's low populations, anglers are naturally going to not harvest those fish. It's as anglers, I think we do more self-regulation of fish we catch than any regulation that we can put on a water body. Because if I'm not catching fish, I'm not going out there. I'm going somewhere new.
Right.
Well,
yeah. Yep.
And we talked about it with the show with Mark, and we talked about when we had the Bills on the year before, and Mike Peluso jumped on the show saying regulations, slot limits hurt lakes. And I was always like, when we had the meeting on the Lake Oahe a couple of years ago, we have an abundance under 15, we have none 15 to 19, but we have an abundance of overs. And I said, well, aren't we protecting the wrong fish then? But my answer now is, after the show, because it made light to it, is if we put a 15-inch minimum on a lake, we're catching females most likely at 15 inches before we're catching the males. Because if you were catching that breeding stock, and to me, I'm gonna come out and say it. I'm not gonna be shy about it anymore. Get rid of the slot limit. Get rid of 1/20. Our fisheries will be healthier. You can crucify me all you want. Science tells me our fisheries will be healthier.
And I just go back towards what I said earlier. I mean, Mother Nature does a pretty good job taking care of her creatures, right? I've always felt that. That's kind of the approach I always take. And again, I'd point to Ponset because that was the easy answer there. I think we all experience that. But there's a lot of regulation between Mother Nature, ourselves, the weather. That those aren't exactly the biggest factors when it comes to healthy fish populations.
I think it matters more on forage.
Yep.
Forage,
yeah, right.
Forage.
Well, and I'll even take that a step farther, Kurt, and I'll kind of wrap this up. It matters more on productivity because that's going to set the tone of everything, right? I started the show saying that Lake Francis Case is going to have good years when we have big runoff events at a localized level. That's because all those nutrients are pouring into the system. Guess what that leads to? Increased forage. Guess what that leads to? Increased fish. Now, Lake Oahe, if we blow the river out and that's going to cause forage-based collapses, but a little bit of a different example. But it starts at the very basic of that element, and that's it. This is the one thing I always try to pound home when I have these types of conversations: is recruitment, growth, and mortality. Recruitment is getting those small fish in, growing them to those 15-inch sizes and bigger. And like you said, you called it a kill rate a few minutes ago, but yeah, that mortality.
I couldn't come up with that word.
Yep. I love that Mark said it. Like, fish die. We don't think about fish dying. It's like if it's not got a hook in its mouth, it doesn't die, right? Fish die all the time. It's nature.
We talked earlier. You guys everybody's like, oh, they're beating up on these big fish, and you guys just made open game to beat up on big fish. I never thought about that. 14, 15 pounder going into next spring. Even if you catch and release it and still living, there's way more fish die spawning than anglers catch.
It is a highly stressful event. I mean, it is incredibly stressful, especially, again, when you look at those big females, they're old females. Mark hit the nail on the head. That's a big energetic demand. And even when you look at it from the angler's perspective, and we joke about it, that post-spawn bite's not very good, but you can literally see those fish just suspended out over deep water, not doing anything, right? That's just how stressful spawn is. And that's a healthy fish, right? That's not a fish from 2009, 2011.
Yeah. What the average rest period there is? What, 10 days, 7 to 10 days?
Generally
That's a long time.
A week or two, and it depends on the fishery. It depends on the weather. But yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, Chasen. It's it's a big event. It's all those calories that they're expending. It is such a massive undertaking just as part of that natural process that you can hang a bait in front of those fish all day long. They might not go because they ain't going at all.
And we don't see dead walleye, right?
No.
I mean, every once in a while you'll see something on shore, but a walleye dies, it's on the bottom, it doesn't come to the top. Every once in a while you've got your oddity, well, take for instance, I think it's called Jace, or it was called Jace. There's a small lake there by South Brush that had winter kill this year.
Yep.
And they lost. Did you see those pictures? Lost a ton of big ones.
Yep.
And I think some perch and some bluegill in there. We fished that thing 10 years ago to 8, 9, 10 years ago when the GF&P pulled everything out of it. There was still stuff left in there. But this year's problem, we had plenty of sunshine. We didn't have snow on the ice. But I was on that lake the very first day we could ice fish, full of black dead weeds, and the water level was way down. So you've got an abundance of carbon dioxide and not enough water column to handle oxygen for those fish to live in it. And that was an unfortunate deal. So for those that say, well, yeah, we do. We see dead walleye all the time. Well, you do on a small pond, shallow pond, when the wind blows them from the bottom up onto shore.
Yep.
We got a comment here that I've been holding on for a little bit from Brian. Question for Nick.
Yep. Is there a way to have a slot limits every 2 or 3 years, or just when we have good classes release it? So that's a really good question, Brian. And now here's the other thing I kind of want to get into. When we're talking 2 or 3 years, we're still talking that same fish, right? So I get what you're saying here is, let's say 2 years old, let's put it at 11, 12 inches. Let's say it's right at that 15 inches at year 3. When you start getting into complex regulation like that, what we're also kind of doing is we're making it difficult for the anglers. If every even year it's a slot limit and every odd year, I'll tell you this much right now, I'm going to have some violations on me because I ain't going to be able to keep it straight. I'm going to tell you that.
The answer is just get rid of the slot limit.
Exactly. And I mean, what you're saying right there too is if we've got pretty consistent reproduction in this hypothetical kind of situation, it's going to have good years and bad years. And that's what we see in eastern South Dakota. You see a hot lake, and then you see a lake that kind of turns off for a year. And it follows those ebbs and flows of those populations of what those fish are doing. So my short answer, the first thought I have is I don't want to make regulations complex that it deters people from fishing or makes good actors just by accident bad actors. That's the last thing I want to have happen. But at the same time, in that situation, we're probably going to be doing more harm than good, because if you're having those natural ebbs and flows, Mother Nature is going to take a lot better care of her than we can, just putting regulations on and off. And
well, now I know there's more that goes to this next statement, but look at Mille Lacs Lake in Minnesota. Probably one of the most restrictive lakes in the entire country, that I've heard it to be 1 walleye, no walleyes, 2 walleyes this size. Like I don't even want to go fish Mille Lacs because I don't even know what the regulations is. It feels like it changes by the day, and that fishery is terrible.
And I mean, you're spot on, Kurt. There's a lot going on in that situation that we don't have time to get into. But I mean, that is a fantastic. I'm not making plans to go fish Mille Lacs. I'm not. I'm having the same thought as you. So I maybe can or can't, depending on the month, go keep a 18-incher or not 18-incher. I don't know. I just don't want to go, right? And, that fishery's been struggling for a long time.
Mother Nature kind of dealt us a bad hand, though, over here in eastern South Dakota. So we lost Albert. We lost St. John. We lost Brush. I mean, Brush has some big fish in it, but it's just not, it doesn't fish like it used to. Oakwood, east and west. I mean, that just, and I've tried.
Oakwood is a terrible example of just a fishery getting Mother Nature just not, it was an awesome fishery, and then it hasn't recovered from that winter kill. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago? You're spot on.
Yeah, 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Yep.
You get, like, you've got Oakwood, you've got Brush, you got Albert. So guys that used to fish that, I used to fish Oakwood. Yep. I didn't need to go fish Ponset until I heard that I could catch 100 walleye. Then I'm up there, or the jumbo perch are biting, right?
Yep.
So you've got all these guys who were fishing Oakwood, or they're fishing Albert, or they're fishing Brush. We're not on these like we used to be. So now we're on Ponset, we're on Thompson, and the pressure is higher on those lakes. And I understand that we've got to have a place to go, right? Some of us are smart enough to find other lakes that have that become gems,
Yep.
and that's a secret you got to keep to yourself. I think Brian would agree. He's got secret spots as well, and you've got that success. But the general public is fishing Ponset, Thompson, the bigger lakes. Bitter. I think Bitter got just beat. They had the daylights beat out of it this winter, but I'm guessing it will still produce some nice fish.
I'm actually going to tell you some kind of contrary information there. And
okay,
I was, as you know me, I have lots of answers to these questions. So whether they're right or not, Bitter, that was actually needed, that high harvest, because those perch rates were about 2 inches behind what we normally see. You had just such massive year classes that it was, as Kurt alluded to, it was pretty good to see some of those fish taken out. And yeah, there were a lot of those 11, 12, 13, up to 14-inch perch caught, right? And those are taken home. Those are harvested by anglers. But as far as the fishery standpoint, that probably did more good as opposed to bad that it did. And to kind of bring this full circle, every fishery is unique, right? Like we talked about Case, we talked about Lewis and Clark, Oahe, Sharp. That's easy answers. But even over there, all those fisheries are unique. There are lakes that I can tell you a winter kill is a very good thing. If it has a lot of carp, if it has a lot of bullhead, and that thing just bang, nuked out, dead, and we can go in and we can put walleyes, pre-spawn perch, guess what? 2 or 3 years, that's going to be an awesome fishery. Oakwood, it didn't happen, right? It just hasn't come back like you would think.
Yeah, there's something weird there.
Yep. And
the water level has been way down. And it's a sandy, gravelly lake. It should just be smoking for walleye and perch.
Yep.
But boy, I'll tell you what, it isn't coming back. But the thing that I'm starting to understand. What'd you say?
Farming chemicals. Sorry, farmers.
That one I get
it. We get plenty of runoff. Although I guess we've kind of been in a drought for the last year and a half. We haven't had a ton of rain, but I guess we still get some leaching and some runoff and that type of thing. But yeah, I think once you understand the lake cycles,
yep,
right, it ebbs and it flows. It's not always going to be there. The hot spots are going to change. You've got different fish, different, so I had to learn stop fishing memories.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, what Lake Francis Case anglers are going through right now. I'm going to be honest with you, Kurt. I'm super interested to see how these next 2 months on Francis Case go, because I think you're going to see those anglers that do really well. They might not have done something that we thought was normal 3-4 years ago. I think I'm really interested to see that at a very personal level. I hope I'm one of them, right? But I mean, I think that's something that, like you said, Jason, if they go fish the same spots and try to do the same thing and did what they did for the last 10 years, we saw it, you guys. They didn't catch fish last year. They didn't. Let's switch it up. Do something different.
Well, and prime example, post 2011 flood. Yep. I mean, Sharp completely changes the body of water. Yep. Sandbars are in different spots. Everything is in different spots. And I mean, I remember guys telling me, that was my favorite spot to fish over there. Now you can't get to it.
Yep.
And I'll break the news to everybody tonight. Fish have fins. They swim. Weird. It's weird. I know.
Yeah, but it's hard to accept sometimes, just
because you caught 100 fish a day off of that rocky point here doesn't mean they're always going to be there.
Well, and you make a great point on Sharp, that Sharp physically changed. And while Sharp was physically changing, Oahe was biologically changing because of the same event, because all that forage had been swept through. That we kind of talked about it, the smelt washed through and the Cisco took off. And guess what? 10 years later, 15 years later, we ended up with the best trophy walleye fishery in the entire country simply because of that event. Granted, we definitely paid our dues to get there, but it just changes physically, it changes biologically. These reservoirs, Mother Nature, constantly changing, constantly unique, just like all of us. All of us are anglers that are listening to this podcast, right? we're all completely different people, though, and that's kind of how you have to think about fish and
yeah.
fish.
I mean, Nick eats pulled pork 7 days a week, so
or pork ribs.
Or pork ribs. I mean, I don't think he's seen a T-bone in 10 years, but anyways,
I never thought a wahi would rival the Columbia. I mean, Columbia still has a wahi beat for big walleye, but
it goes back to literally what Mark said. How do you grow a big walleye? Rainbow trout.
Yep.
They have salmon. They have, that's what they have in that fishery. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad went out there, and I've never been there. Wanu, that's a bucket list trip for me. Obviously my black lab wants to go too, but them people out there throw walleyes on the shore like they're carp. Yep. Where was it last year, Brian, or we saw that deal in Canada that they were paying a bounty to get rid of walleyes, like literally paying people to take walleyes out of the lake.
Yep.
Ship them here.
Shame.
Andy chimed in.
I figured that would. We said
that did not surprise me.
Well,
not one bit.
And Andy brings a great point, and you hit that nail on the head too, Kurt. I mean, you said forage earlier. You're 100% spot on. Mm-hmm. They're eating naive rainbow trout that are basically bodybuilder meals. Yeah. Right. If you tell me to go catch the biggest walleye per pound and I can catch one, guess where I'm going? That's where I'm going. Now, if I want to go beat them up and have a great day pitching jigs, catch 100 fish, yeah, I'm going to come down here on sharp. But, you look at the forage, you look at the fishery itself, that's the place to go.
Yeah, it's like eating pizza every day or eating protein shakes and,
It's protein pizza, those rainbow trout.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned sharp. Sharp is full right now too, right? It's up. Is it a foot and a quarter, something like that, above full? So is that going to change how things fish, or is that a secret that we're not going to give out?
I think about it less on sharp, just because sharp doesn't have those major fluctuations that you see like a wahi. Like
you're talking, I mean, sharp 2-3 feet. That's a major fluctuation.
Yeah. And it can happen between a morning and an evening up here in Pierce. So I would say not too much. It just depends on that amount of flow.
So what you got to realize is, so people don't understand is Oahe is the last hold reservoir on the system. So Oahe, Chicaquia, Fort Peck can all hold water.
Yep.
Everything below us, within a couple feet, what comes in has to go out. Like, especially sharp. Sharp's probably Lewis and Clark. I don't know much about Lewis and Clark.
Yes. Yep.
You can't, there's not room to hold 5 to 10 foot of water.
It's a transfer reservoir. And that's what led to that big flood we had in 19 is what happened is all that rain, all that precipitation took place in that Yankton, Sioux Falls, southeast, Iowa, Nebraska area. That dam isn't meant for it. Gavin's Point was cranking water because that's not what it's meant for, Kurt nailed it. Those upper 3 reservoirs, those are the big ones. Francis Case is the 4th biggest one. Guess what? I talked about how we draw Francis Case down every year. Well, the Corps does. I gotta blame the Corps there. But I mean, that's literally for winter storage, and it's going to fill up this time of year. It's filling up right now, and that's partially what helps the walleye recruitment too. And
that's the thing is that filling up. Drawing that down is like a drop in the bucket to drawing, a wahi down. And they draw that one down a little bit, but that's, I mean, the deep dive app says it's 20 foot off right now.
Yep.
So that lake, that's probably about the peak fluctuation of 20 feet on Francis Case. That's about all you're going to see.
Yep. And that's off that winter drawdown, because I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it is like 15 to 25 feet that it's drawn down in the winter. So it's right in that ballpark. Yep. You can see it right there.
And the thing about that is generally that lake's going to fill back up.
Yep.
And if we looked at lake levels now after the storm they had on Saturday and all the runoff they're getting this week, that lake's going to come up a couple feet pretty quick.
Yep, it sure will, especially when they're pumping water through. And, even when you look at it, we'll go back to the mountains again. Mountains is about 90 to 100%. It's just below about average snowpack. Doesn't really matter for Francis Case. It matters for Oahe. Doesn't matter for Francis Case.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
learned a lot.
I'm a better biologist than hydrologist. That doesn't mean I'm a good biologist, but that's.
Oh, come on now. You're Nick the biologist Harrington.
I was gonna say I love these conversations though. I love these.
Oh, I do too. I think the viewers did too. We kept numbers tonight, and I think this is the stuff people are looking for. I hope you got what you were looking for, and you heard what you wanted to hear, and you got what you came for. So perfect.
Awesome.
Well, thanks everybody, and reminder: still spots in everything but the Gov Cup. Sharp Showdown has quite a few spots. And Cedar Shore, Pike Masters, Bass Cup, Gov Cup. Sorry, you missed out a long time ago, but get signed up. The fishing is hot on Francis Case. The weather, I'm going to knock on wood and says looks great. Sign up now because it looks awesome right now.
There you go.
Don't wait a couple days or an hour because it's going to look terrible.
That's the old bait and switch right there, Kurt. That's
right on. There we go.
Things.
Uncle Lou, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Uncle Lou.
Nick, thank you. All right, you guys take care. See y'all in a week.